All right, unit 2.7 is deductive reasoning. The thing we started with in unit 2 was inductive reasoning, which is following patterns. Deductive reasoning is a little bit different. It's kind of almost the opposite. Okay? So deductive reasoning is the process of reasoning logically and drawing a conclusion from facts and statements. Think about it this way. This is what the police do, right? They gather evidence, and then based on that evidence, they draw a conclusion. They use deductive reasoning, right? All right, the first law of deductive reasoning is the law of detachment. And the law of detachment says if you are given a conditional statement, here P then Q, right? That's our conditional statement. If the hypothesis, which is your P, right? That's your P. If your hypothesis is true, then the conclusion, that's your Q, is also true. All right? The law of detachment says that if you are given a conditional statement, if the P is true, then the Q is also true. Right? And symbolically, this is represented as if you are given a conditional statement and the P is true, therefore Q must be true. Right? This little doohickey symbol here means therefore. It means therefore. So, if the P in your conditional statement is true, therefore Q must also be true. But it has to follow this path. The pattern is PQP leading to Q. If you don't follow the pattern, if it breaks pattern, then it's no valid conclusion. You can't draw a conclusion if the evidence is not there. Right? So, let's see what that looks like in reality. Use the law of detachment to give a valid conclusion. If not possible, write no valid conclusion. Right? If there's not enough evidence, we have to say we cannot draw a valid conclusion. Right? So, if Mark saves $30, that's our P, then he can buy a new video game. That's our Q. And then it gives us our P and tells us it's true. Mark saves $30. P is true. Right? Remember, P, your P has to be true to make your Q true. P, therefore Q. But if it doesn't follow the pattern, PQP, then you can't draw a conclusion. Also, if it goes PQP false, then you can't draw a conclusion. You can only go based on the evidence you are given. Right, so the conclusion we can draw, if Mark saves $30, then Mark can buy a new video game. Mark can buy a new video game. Right, that's the conclusion we can draw. We cannot decide whether he did buy a new video game. We don't have enough evidence. We can only draw the conclusion that he can buy a new video game. Make sense? Alright, again, if a quadrilateral is a rhombus, that's our P, then it is also a parallelogram, PQ. quadrilateral ABCD is a rhombus. So it's giving us the truth of P. P is true. P is true. It's telling us P is true. PQP, we followed our pattern. P is true. So we can conclude that a quadrilateral ABCD is also a parallelogram. They gave us the evidence. We can conclude that quadrilateral ABCD is also a parallelogram. That's the conclusion we can draw based on the evidence we were given. All right. Number 3, given, if you are 18 years old, then you can register to vote. This is our P. Olivia is not 18 years old. But it's not enough evidence. What if she's younger than 18? Then she can't register to vote. What if she's older than 18? Then she can register to vote. So because they didn't give us enough evidence, all we can say is no valid conclusion, right? If they had said Olivia is not yet 18 years old, then you could say she's too young to vote. But they didn't give us that evidence. So we have to put no valid conclusion. We can't draw because she might be old enough to vote, she might not be old enough to vote. They haven't given us enough evidence. We don't know if P is true or false because we don't know if she's old enough to vote. It didn't tell us. All right, you pause it and do number 4 and see what you come up with. All right, given, if the sum of the measure of two angles is 90 degrees, P, then they are complementary, Q. And then it says the measure of angle J equals 58 degrees, and the measure of angle K equals 32 degrees. So it does give us a P. Is P true? Is 58 and 32 90 degrees? Yes, so it's true. So because it's true, we can make the conclusion that angle J and angle K are complementary. Angle J and K are complementary. We can make that conclusion because the evidence they gave us is true. And the last one, let's make it interesting, for law of detachment. All right, think about detachment as separating. So we're using this information to determine if this information is accurate. This is our evidence. Is it enough evidence to make a conclusion? I don't know. That's what we have to figure out. All right? So given, if you plan to attend prom, then you must purchase the ticket. If then, Sarah purchases a prom ticket. It's not a P. It's actually a Q. It's an information about Q. Right? But the pattern is PQP, and P has to be true. It broke pattern. PQQ is not the pattern. So it has to be no valid conclusion. Right? Because We know she purchased the ticket, but we do not know if she plans to attend prom. Maybe she was buying the ticket for someone else. We don't have enough evidence. No valid conclusion, because we do not have enough evidence. If you don't have enough evidence, you have to say no valid conclusion. All right? The other law of deductive reasoning is the law of syllogism. Syllogism allows you to draw a conclusion from two conditional statements, two if-then statements, in which the conclusion of the first statement is the hypothesis of the second statement. The law of syllogism allows you to draw a conclusion from two conditional statements, two if-then statements, in which the conclusion of the first statement is the hypothesis of the second statement. So whatever conclusion you draw from the first conditional statement, it becomes your hypothesis for your second statement, right? So it starts with an if P then Q, right? Conclusion becomes your hypothesis. If Q then R, right? Because you need another letter. It's leading to a whole new conclusion, right? Therefore, P R. If P then R. Right? But the pattern is here. You see how it's Q Q? Q Q? So P Q Q R. Then it can become P R. I know. It's insane. Work with me. Use the law of syllogism to give a valid conclusion. If not possible, write no valid conclusion. Simple enough. Alright, let's figure out what our PQQR is. Remember, if it doesn't hold pattern, then it's not a valid conclusion. Alright, if it is Saturday, P, then Jake has a basketball tournament, Q. If Jake has a basketball tournament, Q, then he will need to pack his lunch, R. It follows pattern, P, Q, Q, R. Right? Conclusion becomes hypothesis. Law of syllogism. That means we can go straight from P to R. So if it is Saturday, then Jake will need to pack his lunch. If the pattern holds, P, Q, Q, R, the Q's disappear. And we're left with P, R. If P, then R. We're left with if P, then R. But only if the pattern holds. Let's do another one. If a number is divisible by 12, that's my P, then it is divisible by 6. That's my Q. If a number is divisible by 6, that's a Q, then it is divisible by 3. That's my R. Does my pattern hold? Yes. That means this cancels this. The law of syllogism says you can just cancel it. You can go if P then R. If a number is divisible by 12, then it is divisible by 3. Then it is divisible by 3. That's the law of syllogism. Technically, technically we use this every day. If it's a school day, then you need to set an alarm on your phone. If you set an alarm on your phone, you need to get up when the alarm goes off. If you need to get up when the alarm gets off, you know what I mean? Like literally we use this all day. By the end, all you know is if it's a school day, you need to get to school on time. There's 42 things in between. But the law of syllogism says you could just, you know they're all there, you could just ignore them. You know they're there. Right? Let's do 8. If a quadrilateral is a square, then it is a rectangle. If a quadrilateral is a rectangle, then it has 4 right angles. So, if a quadrilateral, I can't say that word, quadrilateral is a square, then it has 4 right angles. It follows pattern, PQQR. We need one that violates pattern so that we can see what that looks like. If it is sunny this weekend, P, then you will go boating, Q. If it is sunny this weekend, that's a P, not a Q, P, then you will wear shorts, Q. Well, technically that's an R. Let's make that R. But it still doesn't follow pattern, P, Q, P, R. You can't draw a conclusion from that. Those are 2 different statements, that they're unrelated. Right? So because it breaks pattern, you can say no valid conclusion. You cannot draw any conclusions from that information. There is not enough information. There is not enough evidence. Nope. Alright, do 10 and 11, and then come back and see how you did. Alright, if you shop at Target, then you will use your red card. If you do not use your red card, then you will not get 5% off. So what is that? Not Q? PQ, not Q? PQ, not Q, R? That's not pattern. PQ, not QR? There's not enough information there to tell you whether or not enough information. Not a valid conclusion. Not a valid conclusion. You cannot draw a valid conclusion on that. You do not, no, there is no valid conclusion there. It just, okay. 11, if it snows, then school will be canceled. If school is canceled, then students will need to make up a day of school. PQQR. Law of syllogism says you can delete the repeat and go from if P, then R. If it snows, then students will need to make up a day of school. And when you start writing this sentence, when you start fixing and writing your if-then, if it's wrong, like if it just looks all kinds of wrong, then it's probably not a valid conclusion. No valid conclusion. Right? Double check. If you don't have PQQR, then you can't cancel the Q's. And it's not going to make sense if you do. Good luck.